Hi everyone. Today I want to show you how to deploy your app. Uh, I'm deploying Next.js, which is based on Node, with rolling updates with Docker, fully open source. So what's the goal? You have your application running on localhost on your PC, and you want to deploy it for the web. Um, I'm assuming you only want to deploy it on a production server with localhost, so you're not adding a domain to it, and you want um, rolling updates. So I just wanted to share with you my experiences with Docker Swarm uh, and the things that go wrong, all the errors I've encountered. So maybe, just maybe, I can save you a couple hours. Okay, first of all, I decided to do my bash script in TypeScript. So in Bun, which is a JavaScript runtime, I can execute bash commands with the dollar sign and template literals. So that's literally like bash. And it allows me to do much more complex scripts than I could with regular bash because that's TypeScript. So let's go line by line and I'll tell you about some stories of all the errors that come up and why I have about 100 lines of script so I can deploy my Next.js. First of all, I'm setting the this TypeScript bash runner to throw. If any error happens in inside the bash, it should throw inside the TypeScript. This way, my CI/CD can error uh, when something bad happens. Otherwise, the bash script can fail while the TypeScript continues, and my CI/CD would give a success message. I don't know if that's necessary. I believe it errors by default. Next off, how I do error handling. Anything bad that happens, I'm just throwing an error and capture it with the process on uncaught exception. Inside, um, just printing the error to the console and process exit of one. That tells my CI/CD that the build failed, the deploy failed. Next off, since I have a mono repo, I'm setting the repo root. Then with the arguments, I'm getting the domain which I want to deploy. Now, because I'm deploying 19 sites, so the same code over 19 times with different domains. That's why I have it. And again, let's see my first error handling. Uh, if there's no domain, I'm just throwing an error and telling the user how to use this deploy script. So the user should run deploy.ts, that's actually indexes, whatever, with the domain as a second argument. Then I'm making the stack from my domain. That's the Docker Swarm stack, which is like a folder of all your services which are co-located. So if every site has a dedicated Redis and a database, then the Next.js, the database, and the Redis for every single site would be my stack. Next off, I'm dynamically generating the image tag, which I'll use for building the new image. So I'll build the image and then deploy it to the stack. Like that's it. It should be that simple, but it's not. Uh, Then I'm going to the monorepo root. Then I'm generating a env file. Why? Oh, env's handling in Docker Swarm is a nightmare. So let me show you the config for Docker Swarm. It's just 20 lines, but let me tell you, there's many things that can go wrong. Now about the env's handling in Docker Swarm. First of all, your environment variables would potentially be needed in two places. In the image building, so let's say you're running statically generated Next.js, so you pre-build all your pages, then you need the database connection and whatever. You need those environment variables. It's easy to pass them there. However, it's kind of a nightmare to pass them to Docker Swarm. And like, let me tell you what happens. There's two ways to pass them to Docker Swarm. Either as a path to a environment file, where the parsing is literally shit. Like, you cannot have comments or double quotes around your environment variables. Let me show it like this. So db equals double quotes MySQL whatever. So you cannot have that. You should remove those quotes around the values. And the shitty part is nothing tells you that it parsed it wrong. Like that took me hours to figure out. So yeah, silent errors when there's comments or quotes around your environment variables. So that's the first way with a file. The other way, which I hate, which was the first way I did it, was manually specifying every name of the environment variable that's already inside the system. So your system has all the environment variables loaded. However, Docker Swarm will not accept them if you don't specify manually the names. So yeah, if you don't manually specify the names. I chose the env file. Like, I don't wanna manage this Swarm file together with my environment variables anytime I change. Uh, it's shitty. It already uh, failed my production because we have some critical notification services which send an email. And when I added the environment variables for the email to the env file and to like the host environment, I forgot to add them to the Swarm file. So I thought it was sending emails because the errors happen rarely. However, if they happen, they're critical, and I must get the emails. Um, but the Docker Swarm was not getting the environment variables from the whole system because I had to manually specify them. And I said, "Fuck off." So I made it with the env file, and I'm building it dynamically. So I'm generating the file, like I'm using in physical to load them externally. However, you can load them and make a normal env file however you want. Just make the file and copy the path. Then I'm also making a hash of the envs, so I can bust the Docker layer caching. That's more advanced. So every command in a Docker file is a cache. So this copy and this run will be cached. However, if a uh, if a layer like this one, this run, produces a different output, Docker internally compares the hashes. If it produces a different output, all the layers above will be busted and will be executed again. That's why I wanted to uh, bust the layers only if my environment variables have changed. That's why I'm using the hash here. I'm passing the env hash when building to the Docker file here. Yeah, whatever. It's just for busting the cache. Uh, so yeah, I'm also checking if the file exists. For some reason, if Bun didn't write it, and just throwing an error. Then I'm checking the Docker Swarm state because the Docker Swarm is not initialized by default. So I'm checking if it's up and running and then initializing it. Then I'm building the Docker image. That should be pretty straightforward. You containerize your application. That's the Docker file. It's 40 lines. Like that's a mono repo with Turbo. It's advanced. However, I'll quickly go over. So first of all, I'm installing Turbo repo, which helps me build the Docker image faster when I'm mono repo. Uh, it basically gets all the first of all in a normal Node.js build, you copy the package JSON first, then install the dependencies, and then copy all your projects. Why? Because if you copy all the projects initially, like everything, maybe so if you copy all your projects immediately, um, you have to install the dependencies all the time. However, if you just copy the package JSON and the package log, so if the dependencies didn't change, Docker would layer cache them and not install them. It'll just boost the cache of the whole project copy. So yeah, if the dependencies didn't change, don't install them. Docker will cache them. Uh, so yeah, here I'm busting the cache with the env hash. Then I'm building my project, the Next.js. So I'm I'm copying. That's just the package JSON in a normal Notepad, Node app. But because it's a mono repo, there's multiple package JSONs, and Turbo repo helps me consolidate them. Uh, so here I'm caching the dependencies, installing them. Now I'm building with Docker secrets with the env file, and then as my runner, uh, like that's some boilerplate. Here's the interesting part. I'm doing the health check in a different file, which I'm also copying explicitly because everything else is in the .next directory. So I'm copying the health check. Like the health check is pretty simple. Uh, I have an API endpoint in Next, which is health, and it just sends a fetch to it. And if it's not okay, I'm logging the response message. Just to go over the health too, the health route. So, route. Here's the cool part. I'm checking all the databases because we have to, and returning a manually written message plus the actual error. And then I'm checking the email if the SMTP is working. If you have more services like Redis and whatever, add them here with a try catch. Like add all the services. You must check if everything is working, like independent, and not just the home page. Maybe the home page doesn't involve all the services. If you're probing the health of the whole home page, maybe Redis isn't working, and the home page doesn't load Redis, so you'll never find out why the health check. That's about it with the Dockerfile. Like Docker files kind are straightforward. You just containerize the application. However, Docker Swarm is the complex part. Um, what I'm doing here, first of all, I'm adding the compose file. If you know Docker compose, uh, that's the config file, but for Docker Swarm. Let me show you what it does. First of all, I'm setting the image tag. So, which image the Docker Swarm should use. Also, to remind you why I'm using Docker Swarm and not Compose, which is much simpler. I want rolling updates. So, my application doesn't stop when I'm uh, updating it, when I'm deploying. And also, uh, if the new container is not healthy, it just rolls back to the old one. So it will never produce bad containers. Like my health check needs to check everything that it's running, and if the health check says okay, then and only then Docker Swarm will deploy automatically, built into Docker. Uh, and since I'm deploying 19 sites, every one of them has a different port. I just want to deploy to localhost with a port. I'm not adding domains here. And for the deploy, I'm adding one replica. I don't know, just one. Uh, yeah, replace one replica, delay 10 seconds. So wait for the container. What happens if a failure occurs? Roll back to the working one. Uh, so yeah, that's the crucial part. The new container starts before the old one. Before the old one stops. Uh, so that's something boring, and the env file. That's it. 20 lines. Resolve image. I'm passing never. That's just Claude. I don't know. It it told me that Docker Swarm won't check for the image in a remote repo. Because I'm building the images only locally. I'm not uploading them anymore. And detach false so I can inspect the output if something fails. Otherwise, if it's detached true, when I deploy with Docker Swarm, I have no idea what happened, literally. And now the actual command, I'm loading all the environment variables uh, into my system, into my whole system. Remember, Docker Swarm will not accept those environment variables if you didn't manually specify them or you didn't give it a env file. So keep that in mind. It will not load them. And now I'm deploying Docker Stack Deploy. and my deploy arguments. Here I'm also passing the stack. That's the bun, all the co-located services, which is just my website now, and Next.js app. But I can have multiple stuff, like multiple services for deploying the database, Redis, backend, front end, all at once, and everything will roll back automatically if it fails. And that's just the bun syntax here for injecting environment variables inside the host from process env. You can ignore that. And if it crashes, I'm just doing docker stack PaaS. So it lists everything about the stack and don't truncate it. So for diagnostics, I just want to see what's up with the stack, which I'm deploying. Which, um, and again, throw the error. I'm always throwing the error. If I didn't throw the error, my CI/CD wouldn't get it. And now I'm checking the rolling update. Second trip over because Docker Swarm is not built exceptionally well. Uh, so first of all was the environment variables, the first option. It didn't get from the host. The second option with the env file didn't parse them right. Now, the second big problem I had was even when Docker Swarm had to roll back so the new container was not healthy, it didn't give me an error. It was it's shit. And my CI/CD just passes. I have no idea if the new container is deployed or not. So that's why I made this 20 lines to check if the rolling update succeeded. And what I'm doing is I know the expected image, the new image that should be deployed. And I also can see the currently running image in the stack. And I'm comparing if the currently running image is the same as the expected, as the new one. And if it's not, I'm doing my console error stuff and then throwing an actual error to fail my CACD. Otherwise, I'm saying okay, uh, the expected image is running, uh, and here's all the uh, images in the stack that all the length of whatever the expected image is running, and how many more images are running in the stack. Uh, and here I'm doing some pruning because Docker caches the images, and if I'm deploying constantly for months, uh, I don't know if it could be said that it's a memory leak or not, but the disk will fill up. So after every deploy, I'm deleting the old images. Nobody cares about that bug. And yeah, cache layers. I'm also removing them, which are older than a couple of weeks. So we talk about cache layers in the Docker files. In Dockerfile, so every command produces a cache layer. I'm pruning cache layers which are older than some weeks. So in summary, I highly recommend you write your bash scripts in your favorite programming language and not bash. I kind of hate bash. I know it's powerful, but the syntax and the tooling around it is shit. So I just use TypeScript bun, which gives me all the benefits of TypeScript with easy bash commands. Like like a bash superset with TypeScript. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to write this complexity just with bash or with spaghetti. Uh, the two biggest pitfalls with rolling updates deployment is Docker Swarm environment variables handling. Uh, so you can, the first way is to load the environment variables in your host system and tell Docker Swarm which ones to accept. The second way is to provide it the env file, and that's handled in the Swarm YAML, so in the Swarm config file, however you want to call it here with the env file. Otherwise, Docker Swarm will simply reject all the environment variables for your running app, not the build step, the running app. For the build step, I recommend you always use Docker secrets, because otherwise the environment variables are built into the image. So when you share the image, um, people can see your environment variables, whereas with Docker secrets they cannot. Second pitfall with Docker Swarm, it doesn't tell you with it doesn't tell your CI/CD that the new container failed and that it had to roll back. It exits with code zero, so no success. You have to manually check if the new image in the container is the expected. That's about it, guys. Thanks for watching. Hope I saved you a couple hours.